What's up YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be speaking about having your Saturn opposite your partner's moon in synastry. So when it comes to this aspect of having an opposition between Saturn and the moon, with this opposition, it is going to bring in a natural kind of tension between the two partners where it can actually lead to what feels like a push-pull dynamic between the moon person and the Saturn person at times. But when it comes to that push-pull dynamic, it is happening especially in things like the emotions and the emotional expression versus the stability within a relationship between two people. And that's because when it comes to the opposition, this does also kind of highlight the differences between two people. It also really brings out the differences in each other's needs and an awareness of each other's needs. So when it comes to having an opposition between the moon and Saturn, this also is going to play out in a way where there can be tension at times, and especially between boundary setting and emotional natures of the partners. Since the moon in synastry does represent our emotions, it also represents the more subconscious side of a person, as well as the sensitivities and what the moon person is going to be seeking, that's allowing them to feel more connected and like the connection is nurturing. The moon person here, because of that, is going to seek some kind of emotional support, and also is going to appreciate a sense of openness in this relationship, because the moon person is really looking for being able to freely share with the Saturn person, but also looking to be understood and be able to have that sense of understanding between the two of them. Whereas on the other hand, Saturn is a planet all about structure, discipline, and responsibility. And when it comes to the Saturn person in this aspect, they especially could prioritize the more practical side of things, such as stability in a connection. Whereas the moon person might seek a more emotionally free kind of an expression that's more open with the Saturn person. The Saturn person may actually feel a bit uncomfortable with being able to really experience being vulnerable with the moon person, and even those emotional expressions when it comes to connecting, especially if they are too intense. And so when it comes to having an aspect like an opposition between both the moon and the Saturn, with both of them having these energies coming into the relationship with each other, the moon person here is going to feel somewhat blocked. They're going to feel like the Saturn person is kind of limiting them, and the Saturn person, on the other hand, could feel this feeling of a lot of pressure being put onto them to be more emotionally available or to be more emotionally upfront with the moon person, even though they are more so reserved in this regard. And it's in this way that having the opposition between these two planets does bring a natural sense of tension between the moon person and Saturn person. Even when it comes to what they're both seeking to get out of this connection with each other, moon person may be seeking something that is going to feel like having a sense of being able to depend on their relationship for security and even for emotional fulfillment, whereas the Saturn person may be more cautious and prefer to set boundaries. And for the moon person, that could feel like the Saturn person kind of creating distance and withholding support or being too self-sufficient with them. And with this dynamic happening between the two of them, what can happen is that the moon person can experience with the Saturn person this feeling of a fear of rejection because of this natural sense of independence that the Saturn person can have. They can unintentionally make the moon person feel rejected, while the Saturn person can experience this feeling of a fear of being vulnerable with the moon person, and they can feel like this relationship is leading to them being pressured to really be able to open up emotionally and bring out that side of them. However, when it comes to having an opposition between these two planets, it is really all about being able to have a balancing act between the two of them, and really being able to balance things like restraint versus openness. Because for the moon person, it feels like the Saturn person is kind of restraining them and kind of limiting them, especially when it comes to the emotional expression. And that can feel very restraining for the moon person. But when it comes to Saturn person, they may also learn from this relationship and even especially this aspect between the two of them to be more open, especially emotionally. Because here for the moon person, they can feel the sense of being emotionally vulnerable with the Saturn person. And at the same time, they also can be very cautious, like they need to protect themselves because they can sense this very seriousness that's coming from the Saturn person. And it can feel like it is also constraining them, but they can feel misunderstood by the Saturn person also. And because of all of this, the moon person chooses to hold back. And when it comes to the Saturn person, when it comes to this connection with the moon person, they are very protective, but at the same time, they're also very guarded. So for the Saturn person, they, especially with the Saturn energy, will be very committed, but there is a fear of giving into the emotional side of things. So they tend to be more so looking at things from a perspective of needing to keep things under control. Like they want to bring a sense of discipline and control over the emotional state of the relationship. And for the Saturn person, they may view the moon person as being too intense or being too unpredictable. And with that, this can feel like a lot of responsibility for the Saturn person to be able to shoulder as far as them trying to control the relationship. But when it comes to having this aspect of having a moon opposite your partner's Saturn, they both know that they're going to have a very serious, committed connection from early on. And they could be in this very serious tone in this relationship between the two of them right from the beginning. And it's most likely that it's not something casual, it's something more serious. Even if they don't openly discuss that with each other, they both just pick up on the sense that this relationship is going to be one that's more serious, it's going to require effort, and it is also one that is going to require a level of maturity. And they're both entering into it with that understanding in mind, and that's because of the energy of Saturn being involved in here. They can already feel the sense that it's going to be a responsibility, it's going to be a commitment, and it's going to be something that takes an air of caution when it comes to their relationship with each other. And they feel that Saturn energy from the beginning and from the start. And the moon person here is going to be more emotionally open and even vulnerable naturally than the Saturn person here. And because they can sense that Saturn energy from the Saturn person, they may choose to hold back, especially when it comes to their more emotional expressiveness, even things like playful emotions and just being vulnerable, and even just things that may be deemed as them expressing dependency in this relationship. They may hold that back and they may choose to hide that. And it's like they are censoring certain parts of themselves because of the Saturn person that they know is going to be unwelcoming of these parts of the moon person. And that makes the moon person feel like they're misunderstood. It also could feel like they are limited or they're constrained. And when it comes to the self-censoring that can happen for the moon person, it could be unconscious, but it is coming from a place of them perceiving the Saturn person as having these unspoken or even imagined standards that they need to live up to with the Saturn person. So the moon person kind of composes themselves or even emotionally constrains themselves with the Saturn person in this relationship with this aspect, and that can also lead to a feeling of emotional isolation and it's taken too far with the Saturn person. And because with the opposition, this can create a push-pull kind of dynamic. This is when the moon person can feel like they need to withdraw or they pull back because of a feeling of being emotionally exposed or being overly vulnerable, and even feeling like they are misunderstood. There's a sense of feeling like there's a distance between the moon person and the Saturn person, and the moon person can withdraw from this relationship with the Saturn person, but this relationship does tend to be one where they come back and they could miss each other in those times, and it leads to this push and pull or this cycle of distance and reconnection, because when it comes to this relationship, there is something very steady that's kind of holding them together that they're going to miss even in the times when they're apart. And it does lead to them being able to experience even emotional kind of reunions when getting back together. And in that way, because when it comes to these cycles, it can actually make the connection feel like it is one that feels like a trap to some extent, because they get caught up in these cycles. But when it comes to having this opposition between the moon and Saturn, they are also learning a lot through this experience, and they can be giving in just a little bit when it comes to the emotional self-reliance, and even when it comes to finding a middle ground when it comes to closeness with each other. And they learn this through these cycles. But over time, when it comes to having this aspect between two people, they do have the potential to be able to really balance each other out in a way that can be very beneficial to being able to have a relationship that grows and is also one that has a long-lasting bond. When it comes to the Saturn person and what they bring to the moon person in this connection is that they can bring some stability as well as a sense of safety and loyalty. And when it comes to Saturn energy, this is all about longevity, and there's a commitment that is also being brought into this connection because of the Saturn energy. And on the other hand, the moon person brings a sense of patience and understanding to the Saturn person. And with both of these energies, it can make the relationship feel very dependable, even in spite of any challenges that can come up through the tension that the opposition brings. But when it comes to the opposition between Saturn and the moon, this especially can work when both of them are willing to put in the work towards making things work with each other. Like when it comes to the Saturn person being willing to be present emotionally with the moon person, and the moon person being patient with the Saturn person when it comes to any of their limits or their constraints. And this can especially help in them being able to grow in this relationship over time, and the relationship becoming stronger over time as well. Well, that does it for this video on having your Saturn opposite your partner's moon in synastry. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you found it helpful and that you enjoyed the video. And if you did, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos. Well, that is where I love and leave you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye guys.